Okay, I'm Joseph Hebert. I have been teaching here at Loyola since 1965. I started off as the assistant band director and the jazz band director. And then in 1969, I was appointed the director of bands. I've got my bachelor's degree in music education from Loyola University here in New Orleans. Then I lived in New York for 2 years, got my master's at Manhattan School of Music. Came back home, did some high school teaching, and then when I got the job here, I was informed that I must have a terminal degree, as always some kind of sickness. And I went to USM in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, where I attended summer programs plus 1 year of residency that is required for that degree. I'm in charge of 2 bands. I overlook all the private instructors in wind and percussion, and I can honestly say I enjoy it thoroughly. I'm often asked, hopefully not for a reason that's not good, when I'm going to retire. And as our former dean, Ed Cavett, said, when the negatives outweigh the positives, then it's time to retire. That hasn't happened. I honestly enjoy, and the one thing I try to convey to all my students, if you don't enjoy doing what you're doing, find something else, because the quality of life is not how much money you make, but do you enjoy doing what you're doing. Yeah, I started off as a trumpet player all through high school, and 3 months before I graduated, we were getting ready to go into a festival, and my high school band director said, you know, we don't have any tuba players. He said, I think you got the ears, would you mind trying it out? So I started playing tuba those 3 months. As a matter of fact, the final concert, I did third trumpet on Bugler's Holiday and played tuba when I wasn't doing that. Then I found out that you could get a better scholarship on tuba than you could trumpet. So I came here. In fact, I remember very distinctly, it was raining like you would not believe. We were in the old building on the corner of Calhoun and St. Charles, which is an old plantation home. And third floor attic, literally the attic. People could not stand up because they were too close to the roof and it hit themselves. But I remember the audition with my sousaphone and played the audition, and the director said, fine, we'd like to have you here. I found out later that they had no other people auditioning, so it was either me or nothing. So. And I could remember, after being very happy, stood up with my sousaphone and took out some of the fluorescent lights in the band room. I said, oh, wonderful, you know. But yeah, I started on tuba. Then I had the string class. And the gentleman who was teaching that string class, we took high strings one semester, low strings the second semester. And I started playing bass. And that's when a few of my classmates told me, you know, we don't really have any bass players. Now remember, this is back in 1958. So I started playing. I bought me a bass and started playing on it. And now I do as much work on bass as I do on tuba. And a lot of it, unfortunately, is electric because I enjoy the acoustic. So I did some serious studying on bass when I went to New York, you know, so I could do at least commercial shows and what have you. But I very much enjoy playing the instrument. You know, I do get called periodically by the LPO, Louisiana Philharmonic, whenever the tuba player goes out and auditions or gets sick. Because when they first started 20 years ago, the tuba player moved to Pittsburgh. So they said, well, you know, we're not going to audition anyone because we don't know how long this organization is going to last. So I actually played with the symphony full time, and the school released some of my hours. And I did that for a year, and the next year I just told them, I said, I'm sorry, I can't keep doing this. You know, but by that time, they were established, so they were able to get the gentleman who does it now, Robert Nunez. Yeah. If something strikes my fancy, I don't consider myself a composer. In fact, the only thing two things I've composed were both jazz band pieces that were published by Kender. Now, I ran the Saints band for 24 years on the sideline at all the home games. So one of them was called Vidak, who I wrote for Johnny Vidakovich. It's kind of a lot of kicks for drummers, and it's a showcase for drummers. And we used to use that for all the kickoffs. So every time I played that, I'd get 2 or 3 cents for royalties. And then I wrote another song because every time we started the concerts, in order to introduce the band, I started off with the rhythm section, and I'd say each person's name, and then I'd have the saxes play a melody, and then I'd do another counterpoint to that. But that's the only 2 things I've ever done. Now, arranging, yes, I've done Battle on Ice by Prokofiev from Alexander Nevsky. I've done Concerto for Left Hand by Ravel for a band. That was a commission. And American Festival Overture by William Schumann, who approved of me doing it, and with the understanding that I would send it to him when I finished and he would edit it. Unfortunately, he passed away before I did that. Now, 2 of those works are Schirmer. And I guess they were being polite, because they said this was really too difficult to make any money, and that they would be happy to put them on rental. Well, I know from experience, you put something on rental and you never hear about it, you never see it again. I mean, I personally, if I want to play something, it's on rental, I back off, because I'm not going to spend that much money to get something for a week to rehearse, perform, and then never do it again. But that's, again, I've done small things, but I would not classify myself as a composer at all, Yes, each March we bring in a composer. What I do with the organizations that I belong to, one of them in particular, American Bandmasters Association, they send out a booklet at the end of each school year on what everybody has been playing. So I look at, this composer seems to be very popular. One that's extremely popular right now is Frank Ticheli from USC. And there's something about his writing. He's a trumpet player, and there's something about his writing. He never writes anything, as far as my opinion is, that sounds bad for an instrument. He seems to know just how to combine things. And there's a few of them. Mark Camphouse, who's at George Mason University. Now, unfortunately, gentleman had a serious stroke, Francis Macbeth. So I don't know what the situation is there. This coming March, we have Jim Curnow coming in. And oh my word, Jim must have at least 250, 300 compositions. They come in each March. By audition recording, I invite 3 to 5 high school bands. This is a recruiting effort. And they must play one composition by the visiting composer. Then the visiting composer goes on a stage with them. They do a half-hour program. He goes on stage with them and works his composition first. And like I tell my kids, I probably learn more than my students, because I prepare the music, then I sit in rehearsal with the score and say, oh, that's what he did. Oh, look what he did there. And it's amazing how many of the composers change their mind after it's already in print. In fact, Francis Macbeth told me that he conducts at least 5 performances before he sends a piece into the publisher, because he changes things around. But yeah, there are some people. There's a gentleman by the name of Eric Whitaker, also in California. He's basically a vocal writer, but people hounded him so much that this is gorgeous, that he's now transcribing all his vocal pieces. In fact, we're going to make a CD this year, and one of the things he did was called Sleep, which is originally written for choral group, transcribed it for band. And when Meg, I keep wanting to say Holly, that's her maiden name, Meg Fraser, heard about it, she said, Joe, please, can we sing one piece on the program? Well, certainly, So he conducted them. And then I told him about, of course, he submitted the program. And I said, by the way, the vocal director was really saddened that they weren't going to be able to sing Sleep. So why not? Let's just do it together. Okay, fine. So Meg just listened to the CD, and she says, yes, let's go ahead and put that on there. So, yeah, I find that composers who are writing strictly for the money, it doesn't work out well. In fact, Frank Ticelli just told me last year he's finally starting to put things down on a computer. Up until last year, he still wrote everything by hand. Then he'd give to a graduate student who would transfer it, and then they would send it into the publisher. Well, of course, I deal with those who are only interested in going into music. Speaking to colleagues around the country, it is tough. It is tough because people are pulled in so many directions that music is not a serious hobby anymore. In fact, this is the reason why we started the Bachelor of Music with electives, because there are some kids who really like music, but they're afraid of how they're going to support themselves after. I encourage Bachelor of Music education simply because that doesn't stop you from still being a performer. You know, you study with the same teachers, at least at Loyola you do. You still get the same music that you get whether you're in a performance degree or music education or music therapy or business of music industry degree. But I've found that the students I deal with, they're a little more serious than maybe some of the students going to state institutions. I can remember when I first started here, many of the students were here because they didn't want to get drafted and get into the service. Okay, then that changed, and I was telling one of my students, matter of fact, last week, when I first started teaching here, 95% of our students were commuters, local, 5% from out of town. Right now, that's totally reversed. We have to go outside of New Orleans to get good students. Now, that was starting to be evident before Katrina, but Katrina really wiped it out. And I'll be honest with you, right now I think Katrina has set music in New Orleans back 40 years. And the reason I say that is when you talk to people about music, the only thing they talk about are these street bands that are walking around blasting to the top of their volumes, and that's what everybody thinks music is. Just like I mentioned to you before, one of our students, principal, is telling the band director, teach them rap. You know, but thank goodness I don't have to deal with that because we ought to have a stringent audition process. So the people who are here, we've always had good musicians here, but I think there's more consistency now than there was before. Now, programs all around. I have a loose leaf binder in my office, which is literally about 3 inches thick. I'm constantly looking for articles that people write, companies have done research. I try to stay away from the music companies because let's face it, if they want to sell music instruments, they're going to skew the statistics to where it's going to make the music look good. So I look for other articles, and I can never understand how important music is to society. They've got all kinds of tests for the last 20 years where kids who have a music background score higher on SAT, ACTs. They're usually the valedictorians. You look at geniuses and they all have some kind of music background. Einstein, violinist, you know, that kind of thing. And when we get ready to cut the budgets, what's the first thing that gets cut? Music. And I just clipped out an article where these 3 gentlemen who had MS formed their own band, and they got a little trio, you know. And I'm working with the music therapy department because they realize the value of it. Now, what we have to do is convey that concern to people who make the decisions. You know, see what happens. Well, some schools actually require a specific piece. Here at Loyola, we like to hear something that will show your technique and something that will show your musicality, something nice and slow that you can do it. To me, the preparation is playing often. So many of the students wait until a week before, or if not the night before, and they think it's all going to come out. You know, you've got to really start preparing a good 6 to 8 weeks, playing that piece over and over again, to where when you come into an audition, nerves don't completely destroy what you're capable of doing. I have heard people who audition. I look at embouchures, I try to get past the nervous vibrato, and I look for potential. Now, so far, I have a good percentage rate saying that that works out. We have had some kids who come in, and I wonder whether or not that's the same piece they've played for the last 4 years, and that's the only thing they can play. But yeah, preparing way in advance. When I go out and recruit, I talk to everyone from 8th grade freshmen all the way up through high school. And I tell them, you know, first of all schools, send in your application in your junior year. You know, go and audition in your junior year. You can always go back and re-audition. Just like if you take the ACT, it's a known fact that the second or third time, scores will go up 3 to 4 points. The school will take your best score. It won't look at the lowest, it'll take your best score. But to me, auditioning is a question of trying to set the nerves in the background, really practice, and then come in and play. You know. I have given my spiel recruiting to band parents clubs. I've given them to senior parents clubs at many schools. I have it all mapped out. The very first thing I tell parents is this. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, the quality of life is doing what you enjoy. Now, it is natural for parents to want to have their children do something that they can make money and have a better life. But a better life, again, is not the amount of money. You know, the question that I ask all the time when I go out is, who wants to be an attorney? Well, several kids raise their hand. I said, why? Tell me the reason why. The majority of them will answer because they make a lot of money. And I said, have you done any research on that? And I said, you might be surprised. Now, some of them will say, well, I like to argue. Well, I think that's a valid reason for becoming an attorney. But I tell the parents, look, let your son, daughter do what's in their heart. What they want to do. They'll live up to or down to the standard of living. But you have, I mean, every artist that has ever made a mark on this earth, you know, very few have been millionaires. And that's not to say that you can't, but by doing something you really enjoy, you can live up to or down to your standard of living. Our Louisiana Philharmonic, I'm not going to say the amount, but you would be amazed at how much they make. They have to go out and teach privately, get jobs, and you wonder, well, gee whiz, why would they do this? Why don't they get a job? You can be a public service bus driver, streetcar driver in New Orleans and make more than what our symphony musicians make. But why are they doing it? They love it. You know, I ask myself, how can I fall in love with being a tuba player? How can I fall in love with a piece of metal? But I enjoy having that mouthpiece on my lip. You know, and here I am, 70 years old. I still try to get in an hour practice a day at 7 o'clock in the morning because I enjoy it. You know, it's getting harder and harder, but I still enjoy playing. So I tell the parents, look, if you don't want your kid to go do something drastic and complain about this job, that job, and work, let them do what they want to do and just support them. Well, first of all, as a student of conducting, and I will always be a student of conducting, I observe everyone and anyone I can, coming from a first-year band director all the way through some incredible Bernstein or what have you. And I try to pick up little things. And then from playing in orchestra professionally, I look and see how the effect was brought about and how they got that effect. And I find that, first of all, my job is really rehearsing. Once the rehearsals are over and I go into the performance, my main concern is stay out of the way. Just start them off, help them, phrase, bring out the music as much as I can. But I am not one for flamboyancy, and not that that's not effective for certain people. And in fact, I just finished reading a book on Fritz Reiner, former Chicago Symphony conductor. And one of his first students at Curtis Institute was Leonard Bernstein. And when Leonard Bernstein got the job at New York Philharmonic, and Fritz Reiner saw him on TV and what have you, he says, he certainly didn't get all that flamboyancy from me. I don't know what that's all about. You know, he didn't want anybody to think that that's how he taught. He could do that. And I honestly can tell you, after being in rehearsals with Bernstein, it was a little different than performances. You may not want to put this in, but Bernstein knew all the gray and purple-haired women sitting in the first row with the big checkbooks. So they loved Lenny. And when Lenny would do all these things, oh, let's write on another $1 million, you know, that kind of stuff. So, but you know, he never threw you a curve. You knew exactly where he was. But I try to make sure that I go into every rehearsal totally prepared. I know what I'm going to do, what sections, why I'm doing it, because I see a lot of directors who waste time because they really don't have themselves organized to say, okay, last rehearsal, this transition didn't go well. Let me see if I can straighten that out this rehearsal. They, unfortunately, just keep playing the music over and over and over again and never teach. I was talking to a student this morning, and he said while he was in high school, he had 2 band directors. They were complete opposite. The first one stopped every other measure and just pounded the right notes and the right dynamics in everything they did. They played difficult music. He said the new band director came in, he chose less difficult music, but he started bringing in music terms. He started telling them about phrasing. And I hope that's my direction. Let's put music first, and I'd rather hear a group that gets me excited emotionally. Yes, they might have a little intonation problem, balance problem, precision problem, but if they really bring out the music, because there are many, many professional orchestras, when you listen to them, you wonder, whew, you know. There's a recording, Dizzy Gillespie goes to Greece. It was a State Department tour. You listen to that band and you say, they needed a few more rehearsals. But let me tell you what, you're not going to get a band that swings more. And that swing replaces all the little minor things. If that's all you're listening to is correct notes and correct, then you're listening to the wrong thing. You know. So I make sure I'm prepared. I try to make sure that everyone understands what I'm going to try to achieve, and I try to put music very, very first. It's up to the musicians to do the technical part. You know, I can't teach them how to play this passage. You know, they got to go in the corner somewhere and learn it. But I can talk to them about phrasings, you know, things of that nature. Tempo, to me, has to be determined by the ability of the ensemble. If they can't handle a tempo and it becomes real sloppy and they're losing the musicality of the piece, then slow it down. One of the pieces, Shostakovich Festive Overture, I was in the orchestra with Louisiana Philharmonic when Maxine, his son, conducted. Oh my God, it was so fast. But you had all these people who technically could handle it, especially at the beginning with the clarinet player. Well, there's a very fine band transcription of that. Everyone plays it. Donald Hunsberg did it. And if you try to play it at the tempo that the orchestra does it, you better have a real fine group like the Marine Band. Just last year, a new recording came out with the Marine Band, and they played it faster than I've heard any orchestra play it. I found out that they changed the key and put it into a flat key so that it would lay better on all the wind instruments. But tempo, I mean, this is quite evident even with jazz bands. Sometimes you play something too fast and it doesn't swing anymore. You know, you got to back it off, and it may be 10 clicks slower, but if it's got the feel, well, that's the same thing with me, orchestra and band. You play it at the tempo, and I'm happy to see many of the young composers now won't give you a specific metronomic mark. They'll say between 110 and 120. And I think they've probably done enough guest conducting to where they realize that's going to fluctuate a little bit. Yes, there is a tempo that would be too slow, there is a tempo that would be too fast, but there is a tempo that's going to fit that particular group. I feel as though if I observe someone, rather than someone tell me how to do something, I have more respect for them. Of course, being with the New York Philharmonic for 2 years as second tuba, yeah, Bernstein. In fact, he had given his notice that he was retiring, so we had a whole gang of guest conductors. And at one time, I'm not going to say the gentleman's name, but he obviously got lost in a score. So he immediately stopped and started telling everybody what they were doing wrong, and everyone in the orchestra knew, yeah, well, you were lost, you know. And so, but of course, Stokowski, who I played under too, for efficiency. Boy, he could rehearse a 2-hour program in a half hour because he didn't waste time playing. Like I try to tell everybody the importance of knowing the form of a piece. For example, rondo form, A, B, A, C, A. Why keep rehearsing all the A's? Get to the B, C, D's, and D's because the A's are going to be very similar. You don't need that much rehearsing. I have to say my high school band director was an idol of mine. Only because of his personality. You know, he was a fine trumpet player. In fact, he was so nice, sometimes the discipline got a little strange, but he loved what he was doing, and he was always a friend. You could go see him anytime and talk to him. My college band director, George Jansen, who I followed, was an incredible musician, trumpet player, came down from New York to play second with the New Orleans Symphony, and then quit that and became full-time here. His sincerity was always, every rehearsal was like a performance, you know, and I admire that greatly. But just watching people, I try to pick up different things. So I would say anybody who's done a good performance is an idol of mine. Stokowski was the opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
We swore he wore a corset because it was always a blue pinstripe suit. Every rehearsal, he'd walk out with those little short steps, get on the podium, and the one thing I remember about it is if he stopped and mentioned a phrasing to the violins, and later on the flutes had the same phrase, he would get so annoyed if he had to stop and repeat what he told them. In fact, real quickly, I'll tell you, we played at Carnegie Hall, and they were doing Beethoven, Sixth Symphony. Well, there's no tuba part. So I put my horn down. I got ready to walk off the stage, go sit in the audience, and at the time, got a tap on my shoulder. The contractor, David Katz, he says, "Maestro doesn't want you to leave the stage." I said, "Well, there's no tuba part." He says, "Best that you sit down." I said, "Okay, fine." Sat down. My tuba was still laying on the floor. And so, tap. "Yeah, David." He says, "Just go ahead and hold your horn in front." I'm thinking to myself, this is starting to get ridiculous. Pick up the horn. I was putting it in between my legs like I do on rest. I was waiting for him to tap and say, "Hold it in your arms," you know, because then I was going to have to say. But no, his idea was he had a young orchestra he was teaching. You should be there right in front of him so he could teach. And I think a good conductor, regardless of who it is, you're constantly teaching just like you're constantly learning. Yeah. My students know, and you can ask any of them, My students know, first of all, my door is always open. The only time that door is closed was when I'm giving the tuba lesson, or a student wants to talk to me in strict confidence, then I'll close the door. But it's always open. My office is a three-ring circus. I wouldn't want it any other way. You know, interestingly, when we were designing this building, I sat with the architect. And right next to my office, there's a door lead to my library. There's a door on the opposite end, and that's where the light switch is, way over to the other side. And I asked him, I said, well, why you put the light switch way over there when the door is right next to my door? And he says, well, we figured your secretary would be right here. The students can come in there, make appointments. And I said, first of all, I don't have a secretary. I said, second of all, I will never sit to where the students can't come right in. You know. And just to show you the relationship, I had Father Carter, who was the president of the university for 20 years, sitting in my office one time. We were talking about some event coming up, and a student walked, door was open, student walked in, and I said, yes, what is it? And you could tell the student was very reluctant to say anything. I said, what is it that you need? With this is it. And I said, I'm sorry, Father, but I felt as though, he says, and keep doing that, because that's why we're here. Without them, we have no job. So, you know, I put the students first. They know that. We try to keep a good attendance, because after all, we are an ensemble. We have to rehearse together to play like an ensemble. But if a student comes up and they've got a legitimate reason, I mentioned earlier about having the Bachelor of Music with a secondary concentration. Many of, I say many, there's about 5 of our students who are pre-med. Well, the pre-med labs are right in the middle of all our ensemble rehearsals. So some of them I have to allow to miss a rehearsal 1 day a week, you know. But it's wide open. My wife said it's amazing. When we were in school, we never thought of calling our faculty members at home. I get calls all the time, you know. It's important to them, and like I tell them, you know, the old saying, molehill, keep it a molehill. Don't let it explode. Don't come to me a month after and then tell me what we should have taken care of. So yeah, they come in, and I like being around people that age. I don't like being around people my age. That's all they talk about is their prescriptions, their burial plots. You know, I don't want to be reminded of that. I want to be around young people, you know. So yeah, I think I have a good relationship because they know they can come talk to me anytime.